This podcast has been brought to you by Xenia Travel. We are building the most amazing hospitality network.
So is this Swedish beer?
This is Swedish beer. This is most famous Swedish beer.
All right.
It started out with nerd marketing in Sweden. It was with this beer like 30 years ago.
Very good.
Yeah.
So who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah.
My name is Björn Englund, a Swede from Lund region in southern Sweden. Sweden, Scandinavia, Europe, world.
You are my first Swedish friend.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So you start with the best, and then you
start with the best. Yeah, yeah. So I was told. So we met through couchsurfing.
Yeah.
You were visiting Kiev, year 2000, and then I hosted you. And we became friends from there. Then later we got involved in business together, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about it today. But I want to get to know Björn, or let people know you a little more, because I think you have a lot of good stories to tell.
Yeah.
And this is a podcast about people that have great stories to tell.
Okay.
That is the thread that links everybody together.
Okay,
you know?
Good. Yeah.
It was inspired. Once I was with a bunch of friends in a camping trip, and we had this campfire, and we were drinking and sitting around the campfire, telling stories, telling jokes, and singing. And it was such a happy moment of my life that I thought I want more of that. But it's difficult to be camping and doing campfire and doing all that at the same time. So, but I thought maybe what I want is not that situation exactly. What I want is the feeling. What is the feeling that I got from there? And it is the connection of talking to someone and just telling stories, drinking, and having no agenda and seeing where it goes, right?
I love that too.
I can do that in videos, you know. Also, I don't want to be writing books anymore. Like it's like I did it a few times and it's too painful. Through the videos, I can tell all the same ideas, but in a non-structured way.
Yeah, right? I know everybody tell me, Björn, you have to write books about your experiences. You have to write this and that. I'm a lousy. I couldn't write books. I'm a lousy writer. I think. So it's not in my interest. I rather spend that time doing new, funny experiences and meeting more people, connecting more to others.
Also, I would like to note to people watching this that we are in your parents' house. This is our summer house, right?
The summer cottage.
Summer cottage, and I'm going to add a few photos to the video. To show how amazing this place is. Like I'm totally in love with it. Yeah. It is the exact level of simplicity, of being small and simple and being lovely. You know, and it has just that exact mix of comfort, but being uncomplicated. I love this,
and it's under the radar, and so also it doesn't try to impress to the neighbors around and so on. And it's these kind of red summer cottages is something that caters very much to the minds of Swedish people, because we come from a farming history. So it's really, we connect to the roots when we go here. So that's very, very important. It should be simple.
So this place is lovely, and I'm planning to spend 2-3 days here.
Yes. Yeah. You are most welcome. And this is where I conquer the world in my imagination. And then I go out and I try to do it.
It's working very well so far. We are connected through business as well. But I like to leave that to talk at the end. I remember one day we tried to do a podcast in Bulgaria. but you were so busy, and you had a busy schedule. We end up just starting.
Yeah,
didn't work. And maybe we tried again another time. I don't know. Oh no, I had plans of doing it when you visit me in Miami.
Okay. Yeah.
We also met in Amsterdam once.
Exactly.
So
and
Bulgaria, twice in Kiev, once in Bulgaria, once in Miami, once in Amsterdam.
Yeah, and now once in Sweden.
This is my first extended trip to Sweden.
Oh, okay.
I was here 2 years ago, but just for a day.
It was up in Stockholm back then.
In Stockholm,
yeah,
exactly. And now the first time that I really spent time and I walked the cities and I had an opportunity to get a feeling for the people to discover how it is to interact with Swedes that are not traveling, because it's very different when you are meeting with people when they are outside.
Oh yes,
it's very different. Yes. They are more. Difference. They are. Yeah. Their barriers are different. They are more outgoing. They are already in a adventure mode many times, and they definitely drink more. You know, they
drinking mode, adventure mode, for sure.
Mode, and you know, a lot of things.
Watch out for the Swedish charter tourists.
Yeah,
they are dangerous.
But here I am interacting with people that are at work or going to work and.
Everyday normal Swedes.
Everyday Swedes. And of course I'm building up my own impressions of it. I like it a lot. I think you guys are quite interesting.
Exactly. We are not in the extreme of the distribution curve.
Not here.
No,
you go crazy when you go to other countries.
Exactly.
Then you are like, woo. But here now, you guys are more reserved, I would say.
Yeah, we don't.
A little more reserved. But also, I notice
you have this COVID joke about that. Now in COVID times, we have to stay 1.5 meters away from each other.
Yeah.
Once Corona is over, we get back to the 3 meter.
Yeah, get back to your.
No, I took one of your jokes, but it's okay.
You get back to your normal 3 meters. Yeah. You guys are isolated a lot, and you are also more alone in the sense that you live more independently. You have the highest percentage of people living alone, and you live in very good standards. You know, so yes, you have a lot of walls between one person and the next. You know, you have it's not
everything is regulated, but it's nicely regulated.
Everything is nicely regulated. Exactly. Now I'm going to leave with the feeling that I have been to a country that is really smart. Doesn't mean that I want to adopt your systems. I like to say it this way. I think that Sweden is the best Sweden that it can be. I get that feeling that you guys are optimizing a lot of your systems, a lot of your rules are very optimized for you, and ends up that you have a great appreciation for technical knowledge, for method, you know, and not so much appreciation for populism and things like that.
You know, the heroes in Sweden, they are not generals and admirals and so on. The heroes of Sweden are our engineers. I mean, we are the most exporting country in the world per capita, for example. So we need to be very forward-leaning intellectually and smart and so on to make new innovations that we then can sell to the rest of the world. So to say. So again, in Europe, yes, Sweden is the most innovative country by most standards. But then also, I would say, Milton, that you have actually visited the town in Sweden that is most innovative as well. So there are a lot of smart people around in the little city of Lund, for example. So not every Swede are like that, of course, but On average, yes.
So it's a little unusual sample.
It's a bit we're a bit towards the edge of the country. I mean, it's like if you visited Oxford or Cambridge or Howard or so, but of course on a bit lower scale.
Yeah.
Or if in the Scandinavian context.
Or if you went to US and visit just Boston.
Yeah, exactly.
And you think, wow, these people are so smart.
Exactly.
Just drive a few hours away and see how that goes.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But sometimes this is coming up in some conversations with some friends, because I keep saying that in a similar way, America is the best version of America that is. I really like the way it is, but it's its own way. It has its own culture, its own history. But in a lot of ways, I love the country for the way it is.
We don't want you to become Swedish, because we want to have your flag waving and beer drinking and loud music,
motorcycle riding and no helmets and guns and beer.
When I'm a tourist, I will go to your US and then I will party like you do.
Exactly. But there are certain things there that work really well. And for the untrained eye, they look like chaos, or they look like decadence. And I like to say, no, that's the other side of liberty. Freedom is like a coin; it has two sides. It creates danger. It creates chaos occasionally. It creates confusion. It creates uncertainty for sure, but it gives you more possible outcomes, many more possible outcomes that you don't have in other countries. A lot of things that happen in America, people say sometimes in a sarcastic way, people say, oh, only in America, right? But there are a lot of things that only in America, I would say Tesla and SpaceX, only in America. A lot of from the Walkman. The Walkman is when Sony came up with that, it was an American idea. It was not Japanese, So a lot of these things are tried, and there is a way of thinking about capitalism, that capitalism is a machine of failing things. Of failing a lot of things, so you figure out which ones that actually work.
Like the Schumpeter ideology from the philosopher. It's a creative destruction. Basically.
So America does that faster than everybody else.
For sure.
Everything that fails fast. And then
you get into recessions quickest, but you also get out of them quickest.
Get out of them quicker.
Exactly.
Also, consider that in a situation like 2008, you may disagree with the solution specifically, but one thing you have to agree: it took them 2 phone calls, and in 2 days it was done. Right? Exactly. Someone called the president and said, "We need to do this. We need to do this today." And they called a few key people, in the Federal Reserve and the Congress or something, and in 2 days it was done. Europe probably came up with a better solution 5 years too late.
Yes, exactly. And then,
so everything.
And then every single country has a veto power, also for these things. No, it's true. We have a lot of personal freedom in Sweden as well, but it should not be on the expense of society as we see it.
No.
And then the question is, what is society, and where should the borderline be, and so on.
And I find it amazing that here regular people talk about these questions, and it's like in Ukraine, in the former Soviet world, people talk a lot about philosophy and politics and things like that, but they tend to look at the philosophical way. They ask you about the balance between individualism and and collective interest and stuff like that. But here you guys really go into the economic aspects and political and how it works.
With a research attitude also.
With a research attitude. And here when I mention A/B testing, everybody knows what I'm talking about. I don't need to explain what it is. When I talk I remember many times during this month I mentioned Pareto distribution when I was talking about economic issues or strategy. I didn't have to explain what it is to anybody.
No, of course.
In America, people look at you like, huh? Like unless they are like really into business or into mathematics.
Well, we are highly, of course, we have cracks in our systems as well. But of course, for example, if I talk to my teenage daughter, she said, "Oh, Sweden, everything is so secure and everything is so stable, and I have my freedom, but nothing rocks."
Exactly. I think I agree with her. I agree with her. Yeah, that is.
I would say one important thing. I would say in Sweden it's a high status to be humble, and that you don't really have in the US in the same degree.
The only country where I saw it in the same degree was in Germany.
Yeah.
They even joke that they say that they are proud of not being proud.
Yeah. Swedes are Germans that can speak English.
Yeah. No, but I don't know if I agree with you. I would say that the percentage of people that can speak English better than most Americans is the highest in Scandinavia. Most people here speak better than most Americans.
Perhaps.
But the Germans are more like 50-50. Like 50% of them just don't try. But yeah.
But may I say one more thing in order to understand the Scandinavians and the Swedish, perhaps particularly, is that we don't have oil, for example. We have the forests and so on, and we have all the export companies and so on.
Norway has the oil.
Norway has the. Luckily, they found the oil quite late when they already had an established system of governance and so on. Otherwise, it could have been a Saudi Arabia. If I don't know.
It could turn into something really ugly. Like it happened to Venezuela.
But the oil of Sweden is trust. We trust each other. We give each other the benefit of doubt. We're such a small society, so actually if everybody knows everybody in a small context. So, and this high trust level, it's so important. We have established that, and I'm afraid if that goes away. For me, it's community, societal importance. It's the oil of Sweden is the high trust.
It also has been a very homogeneous society, and in homogeneous societies, trust is very easy to build and maintain. You know, when I saw studies already where they compared homogeneous societies with very ethnically or national diversity or ethnical diversity. And the problem is that they don't trust each other. Not necessarily because because they came from an environment in which they were neighbors and they were fighting each other. Not necessarily because of that, but because they are competing in a system where they have a feeling that is a zero-sum game. That if you gain, I lose. And in that kind of environment, which is typical of, let's say, Miami. There's a lot more feeling of competition and less of a feeling of cooperation. So yeah, the distrust is enormous. And I used to joke a lot that in Miami that I know Ukrainians there, Russians and all that, and Russians are especially distrustful. They don't trust anybody, especially not a Russian. But it kind of sounds like a joke, but it's the feeling that I got from them.
It's a KGB motto. It's like trust but verify.
Yeah. That was Reagan's slogan too.
That trust, too. Okay.
Reagan's.
Let's call it the superpower motto.
Maybe he got it from the Soviet Union, because when he was doing business and dealing and creating these treaties, that it started before him, but when he was working out a lot of these treaties, they kept saying, we trust, but we verify.
Right.
But I wanted to mention another thing that I wonder how much you are aware of it, which is Eric Weinstein called it social gravity. And so it's the force pulling you down by the society around you. And it usually is expressed in feelings like like I heard people complaining in Germany that when you're successful and you make money and you do things, and then you change to a new car. Something that in America we consider very normal. Okay, I got the new car now because now I can pay for it. Then people stop buying from you. They start effectively undermining you.
Yeah, exactly. You shouldn't think you are better than anyone else.
Or something like that. Yeah, it's or when your parents say, well, but you are just a kid from this little town, you know, stop talking about going to work for NASA. Stop, you know, you are daydreaming too much about going to MIT, you know, because you are just a kid from a little farm in the middle of a little country in a little continent, right? So they have this pressure, and I never felt that in my life. Like my parents were always
neither did I.
Yeah, my parents were always like, "You want to do what? Oh, okay then. Then that's what you want to do." You know. And they were very clear to me that most people will fail. You are probably going to fail, but it's worth trying.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I think what I hate, and clearly I would say 95% of Swedish society hates, is when you get into the von oben attitude. Because that we really dislike. So if you're successful, yes, please go ahead and change your car and do this and this and this. But if you think that you are a better human being than the next one, then it's like knives out. You know,
being immodest in your attitude.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, this is in our culture. It's humble. Humble is my middle name. Mr. Humble. Yeah. No, but it's for most Swedes. Yeah. But clearly in this high innovation city of Lund, there it's like this, the professors at the different faculties and so on, you know, they're being successful. It means that you have to have high degrees and so on, of course. High grades and so on, not only of you but also of all the pupils and so on. And it also means that on the status side you should not buy a new car because you're philosophically on another side of society. So for example, the coolest thing you can have, even if you're an economics professor, car wise, it's a 30-year-old Saab. That's a cool.
You're describing one of my friends. He is a professor. He drives like a 1980 something Saab that is falling apart.
Yes, doesn't matter.
One of my friends, he's American, but he lives by that. System.
I have a Volvo Cabriolet, and I almost not dare to show up in Lund with my car because people will say, "Oh, what? Why?" No.
I'm curious about one thing though.
We are a bit strange, but I also say that sometimes we are the little hobbits, you know, of the world. You know, it's a nice part, but we wouldn't make a good superpower. Military-wise.
I don't know. No. Yeah, well, we can joke about it forever, but I'm curious about one thing.
Yeah,
which is, what is the perception here of someone that doesn't have classic education, but then is doing stuff, you know, side by side with the professors? And I ask that because in my experience in America, it's a lot of companies are very open to that. Like there are companies that you go that they post a job. For instance, it says you need, you know, master's degree level on this thing, and you show up there with no papers at all, no diploma of any kind, and they say, "Oh, you really know this? Okay, then we'll test you."
Yeah, it's again. Then you come to the downside of this regulated economy, I would say. So if you post something like that in Sweden, it needs that minimum of some certain kind of degree. So you cannot just step in from the outside and just show that I learned this from life and I know this better than anyone else. It's a bit more complicated.
That means someone homeschool or self self-develop, will have a harder time.
To have these degrees are quite good and important. Now, luckily, it's a meritocracy in the sense that you can get into these schools quite easily. They don't, education is free in Sweden all the way up to university, and so that's not a problem. I would say, but yes.
Yes, it is a problem.
But yes, it's a problem. You should have the degree. Yeah.
I had a really good job in Boston, and it's so long ago that now I can say this. One of the requirements for the job was that, and I didn't pay any attention to this, but that I had to have at least a bachelor's degree on computer science and all that. And I got the job, and I totally ignored that because that's the way that my mind is trained to do. If something is a problem, just ignore, because maybe they don't enforce it, and deal with the problem if it becomes a problem for you, right? So I got the job, and I was working on it already, and then one day they called me at HR. They said, "Oh, we are missing some paperwork from you. Like, for instance, you didn't provide your diploma or your whatever they call there, whatever is the equivalent." And I said, "Oh, I didn't finish yet." Which is technically true.
Exactly.
I didn't finish.
Even if you started it 20
they said,
years ago.
I did like 3 weeks of college. So they said, "Oh, okay, when you're done with that, just don't forget to submit the papers, because we need to put that on your file." And then every year they would call me again, "Hey, you didn't submit your papers." I said, but it was usually a new employee at HR, right? They'll say, "Oh, because I didn't finish yet, but as soon as I finish, I'm going to send it to you." They never asked me how much was left to do, because, then I would have to say, well, it's about 98.5% of the thing was not done yet.
I also managed to get through the hole in the fence. I started my PhD courses in economics without having finalized my master's. And I still haven't finalized it, actually. So yeah, sometimes you can get to the next step, but it's quite without finishing the previous step. But normally you don't do like that. It's also that unions are quite strong in Sweden. We also have these insurances and etc. Insurance companies expect you to have. It should be regulated in order for them to insure you and so on. So.
Which is complicating IT, because it's one of the least regulated aspects of the economy is IT. Because IT people don't want it. They don't want unions because usually they believe correctly that they can negotiate individually better than the union would do for them. And second, they don't want the definition of what they do to be very rigid, because they tend to move around. As they move through a different business or a different employment, it tends to be easy for them to redefine what it is that they do. And they prefer to not have the walls, establishing that in a official way, or at least in any way that is going to slow down the movement. And including some time ago, just before actually we met, I was talking to a company that does consulting, because I have been doing consulting for years before that, but I was always negotiating individually, and I thought maybe I'll join a company that they have hundreds of consultants and they are used to charging top dollar for that and all that. And I went for an interview with them, and they really didn't like me, because they thought
because you were not unionized.
No, because I'm weird. In a way, like they ask,
we can all agree on that.
We can agree on that. The standard question they ask you.
I would employ you anyway.
One of the standard questions they ask in every interview is, where do you see yourself? What do you see yourself doing in 5 years? Right.
Exactly.
Which, by the way, everybody got it wrong in 2015. But what do you imagine doing? And I said, I have no idea. Are you aware that the average tenure for software developers and project and software engineers the average tenure is 3.5 years.
Wow.
So you're asking me to tell you what I'm going to be doing a year and a half after I'm likely to be gone.
Yeah, yeah.
No, so it's the question is unanswerable. And my interviewer later said, well, we kind of don't like that.
You gave a too qualified answer. So perhaps in the end, it's not the place and situation you should be in anyway. So
sometimes I think that when they ask to tell a little about yourself, the only real question, the real answer should be, I prefer not to say anything because I want the job. No, I prefer not to tell about me because anything that I say is potentially going to be used against me. Right? Yes, because you need to cling to something to disqualify the candidate. You cannot. You are not evaluating the technical capacity yet.
No, exactly.
So without knowing any of it, you need to look for disqualifying things. Maybe he tweeted something weird 5 years ago, or maybe he practices something strange.
Or what is your hobby? My hobby is to paint. Oh, then he might only be thinking about painting all the time. They will use it against you.
Yeah, one way or another. And then only if you pass that filter, which is the filter of being conformist and boring, only then they are going to really look into your qualifications and try to measure that somehow. So yeah, of course I didn't have a chance, and I continued doing consulting for a couple more years at least after that. But it was with a company that is owned by a friend that he is weird, more than I am. So he knows me. He says,
those are the funny companies to work.
It is a funny company. Like sometimes I would tell, I'm going to Europe. I'll spend the entire summer. He says, okay, I don't expect you in the office then, but we kept working anyway.
You should have a company named Digital Nomads Corporation. That would be cool.
When I was doing consulting, I was doing that through a company that I created called Mobile Development and Consulting. Which I thought, okay, that is exactly what it is.
Exactly.
So they would pay the company instead of paying me. Because in US, if you do that, then the company is being paid. Then I'm not paying all the taxes and all the stuff as an employee, So there is a certain limit to how much
you can do that as long as you're not in California.
But even in other states, you can do that for a while. But then you have to start paying into Social Security. The government will give you some space to play with that. But if your company is going well and it continues several years, at some point they'll start asking you, why are you not paying yourself a salary as well and paying on Medicare, Social Security and all that? You should be doing that. They are just flexible. And in fact, in America is so flexible that I like to explain to people, especially to Europeans. They say, if I want to do this, how do I get a license? How do I get and all the paperwork and all this and the insurance? I said, no, you don't do any of it. You just start doing the thing. Whatever is the business, you start doing it. Before you have a company, before you have anything, do it and test the idea right away.
This is so important. I know a lot of business developers of startups and also scale-ups and so on, but startups. And people are so hesitant to start it because they are so worried about all the problems. So, and they shouldn't be as worried because along the way there will be people be able to help you. And if you fail, it's fail fast and then you can have a second round later on. A few years later on or whatever. But you have to take the first few steps. And as you do that, people will go in and help you as a team. But you need to go, it's called the quantum leap. You move from the safe area and into this new thing. And there will be people helping you once you do that.
Once you test the idea and you show that it works,
you can take the donkey to the fountain, but you cannot make the donkey drink. You know. Yeah.
Talking about drink, let me get another beer.
Okay. There's another reason to like Norrlands Guld, this Swedish beer, is that when the elk turns blue, then that's when it's cold. It says
it's almost it's
almost.
getting there.
Yeah, okay.
It's getting there. I'm trying all kinds
This is a very good example about how we Swedes will relate to our roots. We want to have elks and reindeers and foxes and so on, the mountain range, etc. But actually, in this area here, less than 1% of the Swedish population lives. But this is what we think about. Yes. And you see there are no mosquitoes here. There is no snow.
No mosquitoes on that photo.
Exactly. When you go up here in reality, tends to be mosquitoes, at least in July.
No Vikings storming the village or anything like that. I wanted to ask this.
Yeah.
How is your Sweden, your relationship with your Viking history? You know, a lot of countries have trouble dealing with their own history.
Yeah.
Usually because it was super violent, or because there was slavery, like in US, or because of some other thing, some other aspect. No matter how long ago it was, you know, they still have some trouble dealing and telling or acknowledging their history. How is it here?
Well, you know, back in the 10th century, we conquered and killed. Now we use IKEA instead. We're conquering the world, but on the inside of the houses. We might not burn them down, but we give you very hard to assemble things. You are still very frustrated.
America is doing that with Starbucks, making everybody else fat.
No, so now we conquer through IKEA. No, but with the real Vikings, it's so... Of course, we have the Viking rune stones and so on, and we have been a Christian country for 1,000 years.
About that,
yeah, exactly. I think that some people, the further away they are from Scandinavia and Sweden, it's not all of the Nordic countries, by the way. It's only Norway, Denmark, and Sweden that were. And the Swedes went to the east, and the Norwegians and the Danes went to the west. So for you English-speaking guys, you tend to relate mostly to the Norwegian and the Danes. But we conquered the Russians, and just as well, just as good. I think we don't look at it as exotic as some of you are doing it. If it's a trendy theme in Hollywood for 10 years, then everybody gets, oh, Vikings. But we have more low-level interest in Vikings all the time. We have to read about it in the school and so on. They were farmers, a bit violent farmers.
They were farmers during summer, right?
I mean,
no, they were farmers all year, but during summer they did the raids.
Yeah.
But still half of their life was farming. Yeah. And they conquered places and they stayed there, and the first thing they did was farming. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say you would be a perfect Viking. Perhaps not perfect, but you are a Viking for sure.
Yeah, as I joke, exactly. And I explain to people, 2 years ago I started saying I'm a Viking.
Yeah.
I adopted that identity, but exactly. 9th century Viking, not before Christianity, before domestication. It's like those were the really violent, weird, and funny times, in my opinion. You know, my favorite...
Funny times, as long as you're on the right side.
As long as you're on the winning side. Yeah, my favorite character is...
Hopefully you're not a monk in one of these places which we raided.
Yeah. My favorite character, cartoon, is Hagar the Horrible.
Yeah. You know that these horns he has, it's actually not from the Viking time.
Right,
It's from 200-300 years before the Vikings. It was called Vendeltid. And when they found that in some burial sites and so on. But it's from that time age. when they found this, they thought it was from the Viking time, but it was from even earlier time.
Before.
So the Vikings never used those.
Yeah.
But and in another we are very progressive on the feminism and these things in Sweden.
I think the Vikings were.
Exactly, were.
In the Viking world, there were three kinds of people. There were free people, there were free people with a lot of stuff, and there were slaves. But I draw a parallel with today's life. What is modern society in the West today? It's free people that have a lot of stuff, and the slaves. The difference is that we don't call it slavery anymore, we call it debt. You know, and so we make them work and work hard. You know,
for
because for less and less, and they need, because they have this, instead of shackles and violence holding them down, it's their debt. You know, from school debt to mortgage to everything else, and basically they have fewer options in terms of deciding what happens to them, which is exactly the life of a slave. And so in my view, what we have today is exactly a Viking system, just with different names. And in the same way that of the slaves, they were bought and sold, they were moved around, they were made to work, they were regulated and taxed and and exploited just like slaves were. And just
in
like
Sweden, the name for we didn't use the word slaves, we said träl, and they had. It's not exactly as the slaves you had it in the US, but
no,
almost
very different.
But yeah.
Also, I read that slavery had nothing to do with ethnicity or even nationality.
Wow.
It was more a case of bad luck. So let's say my tribe invades your village. You were visiting Copenhagen that week. And that week we go and we take Copenhagen. So because you were there, you end up becoming a slave. But there is no feeling about... there is no correlation to us, the conquerors. You were just unlucky. And maybe you have a PhD and you are an engineer or something, and you say, well, instead of working with the cows, if I was doing engineering for you, I would be a lot more useful. Say, well, I'm sorry that you are not happy, but you shouldn't be in Copenhagen that week. Now go back to the cows. It would be. It was even the idea of nationality was incredibly vague at that time. It was very tribal. Yeah, they knew and they cared to a certain point that they were Norwegian or Danish or Brits, or Irish. Which the Irish, by the way, were very similar in methods to the Vikings. But it's someone could come from the south or from another area and be living among them and be completely accepted. Let's say you were a blacksmith, but you were from Spain, from what is now Spain, right? They wouldn't treat you worse because you're not ethnically Viking.
No,
they would remember that you are not from the north, because it's obvious you look Spaniard, but they wouldn't treat you bad or treat you different. And if they moved to go to conquer Greenland or Iceland, then you would go along, no problem. And it's so funny, the Iceland thing, that the Iceland is relatively green, but Greenland is covered in ice.
Oh yes,
and that was a marketing ploy. That was pure marketing. One day I want to do another podcast just about the Viking marketing. It's amazing.
This we are quite good at, I would say. Yeah. No, that's true. And in fact, it can also. I read an article just a few days ago about where they had checked the DNA of 500 Viking graves, and it showed that some of the DNA was even from Same people who had adopted the Viking culture as such up in northern Scandinavia. But it was not so common, but it happened. But also in France and in southern UK, the Picts, the ones who lived there before the Vikings, some of them were buried in Viking graves. So they adopt some even there on the borders, so to say, of Viking country. They adopted the Viking culture as well. Yeah, so we came with the sword, and we were also tradesmen, and we were farmers back in the good old days.
And you traded a lot of people, and one of the articles that I read estimates that at one time or another, something like 20% of the European population of the time became slaves at one point or another.
That's a lot.
And a lot of these slaves were used in the farms. You know, the Vikings used them for farming and to take care of the animals and stuff like that. But a significant number of them were taken to the east through Rus, which is now Russia, right?
Which is that created... You know where the word Rus comes from?
No.
It's a region in Sweden that is outside Stockholm. So it was basically the Vikings from that region. They settled down, and they also established Kiev.
Later,
exactly, yeah.
And then they discovered the rivers and taking the boats across, and which was an incredible idea for 1,000 years ago.
Down to Constantinople or
and then they would go there.
At the time was called Miklagård,
right?
In Viking time.
Right.
And you hear the word slaves, Slavic. I wonder if that can be a correlation.
I don't know if that is. I'm asked a few people already, but I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find yet anything that is conclusive that the words have the same roots.
Okay.
So I'm going to do some research. But I'm very curious about something that is difficult to answer, because it's difficult to talk about ethnicity in the world, in the Western world, because of all the white guilt and all the political bullshit that we are going through. So when you ask anything related to that,
in Sweden it's not such a big problem as it is in
your in US,
because we never were a colonial power. So
in US it's much more difficult. And my question has been, if the Vikings took so many people to the Arab world, to the Arabs, and the slaves were mostly blonde with blue eyes. They were taken from the British Isles and from the north of Europe and from Scandinavia, right? So if the source of the slaves was that, and they were white and they were taken to the Arab world, how come the Arabs don't show those characteristics? How come they didn't mix with them? Because slavery...
It might be because in your question you had a lot of ifs.
Yeah.
So it might not be that they actually came from here, or perhaps the slaves
that I read. That I read about. Most of the slaves were from the British Isles. What is today north of France, Belgium, Netherlands, and north of Germany. That's the main source of the slaves. But then. These people are blonde, and how come they were taken as slaves, and that ethnic lineage disappeared in the Arab world? Because in every other culture that had slavery, there was a lot of
intermarriage.
Not marriage necessarily, just
interbreeding.
Interbreeding, yes, that would be the correct word, I guess.
In fact, I think there are some in the Middle East, in Lebanon area and so on. I think there are in the southern Turkey. I think there are some blonde people.
You see some of that?
This is not my knowledge area. I have to admit, but No, Vikings are fascinating, of course, yes. But we also read a lot about the Vikings, how they behaved when they were in Sweden. So it was more the farming, and the woman had an important role in the house, and they were free farmers. In Sweden we have always had free farmers. We are very, very individualized people in that sense. Don't take away the rights of the farmers, because then you have trouble. This was also recently, let's say 300 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago, when you had these absolute monarchy philosophies going around the world, etc., didn't catch on really here, or to much less degree. You know, Stockholm is one of the few capitals in the world that has never been invaded, basically. We were, like in 1520, I think, with the last time we had a Danish king who was there. And then he was invited there by the nobility. And then within 1 year, we threw him out. He was invited. Yeah. So we are very...
After 1 year, they didn't renew his visa. Okay, you can go home.
Exactly. No, that's our arch enemy. It's Denmark, and secondly, it's Russia, from hundreds of years back. Of course.
Yeah. Well, I would count Denmark more than Russia today, because Russia is on the way down. Anyway, if you want to really defeat Russia, all you have to do is nothing. Just wait.
Yeah, but these little green men, as long as they don't airdrop on the big island of Gotland, which is an unsinkable ship from a military point of view, then they would have a foothold towards all of Scandinavia. So. And imagine it has been a demilitarized zone almost for many years in Sweden, because that's the downside being a Swede. We think the rest of the world is nice. Sometimes we tend to be a bit naive. We give a lot of trust, but it's on the edge of becoming naive sometimes. Yeah, so no little green Russian men, please, in Gotland and other places. But they could just walk in there.
The joke now is that the Russian is traveling. He arrives at the airport, and then he's going through immigration, right? And then they ask, "What is your nationality?" Russian. Occupation? No, I'm just here to visit.
And you know, now with this North Stream that is almost finished, but except for outside Sassnitz, and there are some ships in Sassnitz in Germany, and there are some ships there with the Russian people working on the last edges, and they're not allowed to speak to anyone. But when the Germans and the Swedes come up and knock their door and so you're working on these last parts of the North Stream pipeline that will take natural gas from Russia to Germany, if it's finalized. Then when you knock the doors, and then no one speaks English, but except for the manager, and comes up and says, "We don't want to speak to you. We are Russian LGBTQ people that just go abroad here for a couple of days, and we just want to enjoy our together, and then we work for our living."
One thing that I love to discover more, and we did a little bit of it already, is the Vikings along with the Portuguese. So the Vikings in the 7th until 11th, 12th century, and then the Portuguese from 14th to 17th century, they were some of the most incredible navigators in the history of humanity. And their construction methods are still being discovered. The Vikings a little more, because the boats were amazing, but a little easier to discover how they were made. Like with technology, the long ships are a little more linear in the understanding how they worked. But the Portuguese ships are mysterious. They are difficult to figure out, even though there were so many that sank around trying to get back into Portugal. So there's plenty of remains of the old ships, but understanding how they were really made and how they were operated is still puzzling.
It's so interesting.
Science.
Lost knowledge. That's so
it was not lost as much as it was hidden.
Okay.
Because having a ship capable of going around the world and capable of sinking other ships in the 15th century was the equivalent of today having B-2 bombers. Right? It was power beyond belief. And it was very protected. Like the guns for the cannons, they used to call the guns. So the guns, like very few people in the world knew how to make them. And that was
super secret.
That was the super secret. That was the Patriot missile of that time. So when these companies end up failing because they were greedy, they start sending too many ships too early in the season, losing a lot of them, and they wiped. Remember, Portugal has 6 million people today. It was 1/3 of it at that time, or less than that.
Yeah.
So they wiped out their villages. They are running out of Portuguese to run their ships, and they didn't trust anyone from outside of Portugal, even to be a deckhand. And when those ships were gone and their business model crumbled, it's believed that the church has the designs, the original designs, some documents.
Some library down
in the Vatican, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
But if they do, they never shared. And so far there are, a lot of professors, a lot of scholars in Portugal is still trying to. They built recently some replicas in full size, and they try, but it's still a little mysterious. And I say that because at that time, a ship was the ultimate expression of the culture and technology of a country. It was
the best of the best was available on the ship.
It was not just the best, but also it was the total of that country. Like the captain and his immediates had to know. Basically, they knew all there was in that country in terms of medicine, nutrition, food preservation, raising animals, cooking, mathematics, astronomics. They held very close to 100% of the knowledge available at that time in that country. Today, you can go around the world being, knowing 0.5% of what the people in your country knows, right? You can be an idiot with some credit card and still do it, right? But at that time,
that comes a lot of names to my mind when you
can be an idiot with a credit card and you go around the world on a boat. But at that time, you needed to have the very best, and you could only do that with the consent of the church and the kingdom. Because usually they were
the best of diplomacy.
Because they were big shareholders on this. These things are so expensive, and they were only viable because they could go all the way to China and get spices and whatever it is they want from China, and then come back all the way back without having to use the Silk Road. And go through the Middle East and all the annoyances of dealing with all those land barriers. The secrecy level. And those companies, I learned recently, they held the most precious information, which was how to navigate. How do you calculate your longitude? How do you know the routes? And the English, there is an amazing book called Longitude.
I've read it. Yes.
That tells the story of how the English solved that. But the Portuguese solved it even earlier.
They did?
They did, without calculating. They learned to estimate so well that they could reach, and also the Portuguese had a more precise understanding of currents, and the geography. And as they went along the coast of Africa and South America, and they discovered that it was easier from Portugal to sail south and then go west and go along the coast of South America and then go east again and pass the Cape. Once they discovered that, they left these marks along the coast that they call quinas. So it's little monuments that have 5 sides that they had precise maps and they knew their position. So if they could see one of those signs, they knew exactly where they were, and they could calculate their moves with better precision.
Okay.
So an English ship could see the sign, but they didn't have the map, you know, and they didn't understand the geography and the current so well. So the Portuguese solved that problem.
Okay, I didn't know
better. Okay. Better and sooner, and also they were brutal. Like any image that you may have of English or French or Spanish, you know, invading, conquering, doing exactly the same that the Vikings did before. You know, you come in and you rescue all the women because all their men suddenly died. You don't know how. No, the Portuguese were much more brutal. The Portuguese would get to a new coast, to a new country. They would arrive, and everybody's in awe because, you know, looks like a fucking spaceship, right? It's like the Americans arriving with a aircraft carrier in a place. You know, everybody's like, whoa. But they would go, they would find the royals and all their nobility, and they would kill everybody in public. They would bring everybody to the city center and kill them everywhere.
Yeah.
And then they completely dominated the area. So they say, whatever the law used to be, forget it. Now it's our system.
It's a new normal now.
It's a new normal here, and they left no doubt about it. So they were very brutal, and that is a book I'm reading about it called Conquistadors. That is specifically about the way that Portuguese did business along the way, and the way they totally dominated. So it was not just better navigation, but more effective diplomacy, more effective diplomacy, and it worked. It worked really well for them.
Cool.
Until they ran out of people.
It's easy to say now, a few hundred years afterwards. Cool, but
now we think it's cool, but no. But of course, it was the price paid for everybody that was along the way was terrible.
Of course. It's like everybody think it's so cool with Genghis Khan, also, and he was brutal as well, conquering half of the world, and a lot of these other bloody emperors, I would say.
Don't say anything bad about our ancestor, huh? Because you know that Genghis Khan, we find his DNA in a significant part of the world population today.
Yeah, in most population in the world.
He was a prolific fornicator.
Oh yes, yes. But it was not only because his sperm was so strong, so to say, or that not only because he had so many women, but it was also because of the system that he worked within, and so you need to have and also of course conquering half of the world. It helps out, but it needs to be like 10 stars needs to be aligned for that to happen.
Yeah, it was very unusual, and you can definitely tell that he was an overachiever. He was an overachiever, also very effective diplomacy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the guy was funny. But the world was. Recently, I saw a.
I think he killed 1 million persons in Baghdad in 1280 or something.
Yeah, all the numbers about Genghis Khan are impressive.
I know the rivers were red.
Yeah. The number of times people tried to kill him, and how many times they were attacked, and how they survived. The entire story is amazing.
And it's not only Genghis, it's also Kublai Khan and some others. So not only him, but also his kids and the grandchildren and so on. Yeah, now we're moving all over the world here. Now, so you see, in a relative perspective, the Vikings, we were humble.
You were very understated. You took out the gold and the woman, but you didn't flash anything. You just went back to the farm and said, okay, you work here now.
You know what? I have a wife from Lithuania, so it's like I went over there as a Viking. I took her.
And you brought the woman back?
I brought her back, yeah. And I have in total 4 kids. And one of them have a Viking as a middle name. So it can be, in Sweden, it can be a first name and a middle name. So like my name is Björn and yours is Milton. It can also be Viking. It's not very common, but it's not uncommon either. So in my now 5-year-old son's passport, it says name Viking. That's cool.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
You should rename yourself, Milton.
But I like my name.
Or you should have a middle name. If mine is Mr. If mine is Humble and you could be Viking.
No, I have a middle name. MacArthur.
Ah, okay.
But I like my name, so I'm not going to change it.
Okay.
But if I was to change, yeah, that would be a good idea. Just make it Viking.
You can have an honorary extra name here.
Yeah. One of my friends, she legally changed her name in California to Robot.
To Robot?
Robot. That's her
Not
name.
Robert.
No, Robot. R-O-B-O-T. That's the full name. In the computer, in many forms, you cannot put just one name. You have to put name and last name.
Yeah.
So she writes Robot. I joke with her. I say, wow, the problem is when you hit the captcha, right? We can never go past the captcha.
Oh my God.
So yeah, the robot is a really nice name.
If I could change my name, it should be to Visivig. What you see is what you get, or no, Visivig. No,
Vini Vici.
No, yeah, that's a different thing.
Vigi Vici. Yeah. That's something else.
Yeah.
What you see is what you get.
Canon.
Yeah. What you see is what you get. One of my friends, her last name is Cannon. And one day we were talking about it, and she said, "Oh, what did you think of first? The cameras?" No, I thought guns. Cannon. Yeah. But that's a cool name.
Yeah.
So all right, so we met, and then we start doing business.
Yeah.
And it was, I told you one day, we already knew each other a few months.
Yeah.
But one day I told you, you already knew that I was building a network for travel. Or at least you knew it vaguely. But then one day I presented the project to you and I said, look, I need help. I need help moving this forward, getting more people to help, getting people to invest it. Not just you did all that, but you also invested on it. So
investing is like my profession. I've done it for 35 years. I'm not interested in the consumption side of money and economics. I'm interested in the production side of economics and should we have a market economy or not. I'm a social scientist from the beginning. This is my interest. So whatever that can add on to a community feeling and something that is not destroying the world but instead of improving the world, and etc. I'm there.
And you became
I'm the first mover. Sometimes it's like the first mover gets the bullet and the second gets the gold, but I can live with that.
Okay, but you became an expert in Arab countries. Is that correct?
Yeah, I set up the world's first Iraqi equity fund, among other. I've been working towards Wall Street, London. I've lived in Luxembourg for 15 years. I'm one of those guys that actually, for real, have been standing on the big open floors screaming, buy, sell.
Where?
In Copenhagen, in northern The largest open.
That is where you should have a Viking helmet.
Yeah. No.
You're yelling.
Yeah. No, I love to scream, buy, sell. Or when central bank is coming out with the news, so if they are raising the interest rate or lowering the interest rate, and then all the institutions in Europe and also some on Wall Street wonder what's happening? Should we buy? And then I say this happens now and sell. Oh no, I changed my mind. I buy. Mainly within currencies and mortgage bonds, etc. Currencies and mortgage bonds. Not so much into equity. So I worked within the finance area. I've been working in most different areas.
So why the Arab world and developing countries?
No. So. I've been working in what's called institutional banking first. And then I tried out working in fund management and into private banking a bit, and then I didn't like it all. But fund management. So when I have been working in the big institutions, then you want to try everything for yourself. And you want to try what is the toughest of the toughest of the toughest. I've also been a soldier, military soldier in Lebanon, and after the Gulf, the first Gulf War in Kuwait and Iraq. And this is for another podcast, I suppose.
You know, you crossed paths with Mike. Because Mike was the first tourist after the invasion.
Okay. And so we might have met then.
He has a lot of stories. Somewhere in the book. By the way, I sent you. Yeah, the book. Your books are right.
I was a soldier by the death row in Kuwait.
Exactly, and he was a tourist in the death row in Kuwait. So you guys probably
be lucky that I didn't kill him like that.
You guys probably crossed paths because you were there in different roles.
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
Very funny.
No, so anyway, so it was quite natural for me that I had been to very difficult places around the world doing military soldiering, but as a United Nations soldier. And so when I wanted to start my own investment funds, it was natural to go into what's called frontier markets. So you have the established markets. Then you have other markets like Russia, and so emerging markets.
Yeah.
And then you have frontier markets, and then you have where only the crazy people go.
Yeah.
It's the pre-frontier markets.
And that's
where I went. Yes.
Okay.
So I met very interesting people there. And you really never know when you meet Westerners in, let's say, Iran, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon. But it's too safe. But you really never know if you meet a Westerner there working, if you are best of the best or want to be best of the best, or if you're worst of the worst. For example, I'll give you an example. If you're head of General Motors in Iran, is it because you see the new frontier, this is where things will grow? Or is it because of you fucked up back home in the US, so they really got rid of you down there? So it takes some time to find out. But you're clearly on the outside of the distribution curve.
You're on the edges of the curve.
It just takes some time to find out if you are on the left side or on the right side. But there are some standard deviations there. So anyway, so frontier markets, yes. So, and within this, I needed to spot which areas haven't been covered yet. And one of the things was setting up an Iraqi equity fund. I have been there a bit as a soldier, and now I wanted to go there with money. So basically what I did was connecting Wall Street with Baghdad and having them sending money that way instead of only sending weapons that way and oil the other way. So that I did for a while, and then also for some other countries. If someone would like to do what I was doing back then, the country to go to right now, I think, is Ethiopia. It's the largest country in the world that still don't have a functioning stock market. So yeah, but I have so many other things to do.
It's better to do when you are old enough to be talented but young enough to have the patience.
Yeah, exactly. And now I have 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I take care about so many high risk startup companies that all wants to conquer the world right now. So I feel that that's for someone else.
One of them is mine, so you better stay in the office.
I'm operationally active in
exactly.
Yeah. But my driving force, again, as I said from the beginning, is more the production side of economics instead of consumption side of economics. And the more important the idea of what the company wants to establish, the more I get involved into it. It doesn't mean that it's only me doing it, but it's all this admin, accounting, all this boring stuff, you know, salespeople and R&D and everything. In order to have a whole company fly into the world market, it takes like 20 very skilled persons, at least. And I can be a team leader for that, yes. I've done that for a while.
Well,
yeah, it's very fun.
I'm liking the experience for sure.
Oh.
The amount of things that I had to learn this last month is really impressive.
Okay, that's good.
I'm having a good time, and I'm feeling that I am in the area of you're out of your comfort zone, but not too far out. So you're of your area of proximal ability, right? So you know that you're pushing, you know that you're outside of your comfort zone, but you're not completely lost.
No,
you know, you know that there is someone.
I can pressure you up to a point.
Yeah, but you know that there is someone guiding you if you need.
Exactly.
It's that's good.
I mean, it's like in the piece of a puzzle. If the company is a puzzle, you need to have the core DNA, the core puzzles in the middle that are clear, or at least the frame, and then I can help out filling it in.
Yeah.
So, and then perhaps for those that view this, it can be good for them to know that I'm actually not a frontier fund manager anymore very much, even if I go to these countries once in a while. But it's mainly today I take startup companies or companies with just an idea. They might have a prototype, and we try to get them into the world market. And that's it's not as easy as it might sound, but it's a 10-step process. But right now, so together with 58 business angels, and I'm the head of this business angel network. That's the largest one in southern Sweden. And the funniest, I wouldn't say the largest in money, but it's the funniest one. Because the big money actually comes once you have something to sell and so on, when you make an IPO, when you go into the stock market.
Yeah.
So that's big money, but it's more square, boring money. In the area where we are, like startup and scale-up companies, it's like off-piste skiing. You fall once in a while, but it's so much more doing the off-piste skiing than down the regular slopes. So we have 30 companies that we have invested into. Just 3 of them I've taken a personal operational part. And Milton, Mr. Viking, one of those 3 is yours. So it's ours. This is something we do together. But you are the core DNA. Without you, it would be impossible. Without me, it could still be possible.
But it tends to hit every wall. Then I love that quote from Churchill. That he said that America will always do the right thing after it tries all the wrong ones. And I think I would try a lot of wrong things first. You know, so this way we can go straight into doing it right. But you touched a little bit you said something about skiing, and you have been a sportsman as well, right?
Yeah, I love squash, or racquetball as you call it in the US. It's a bit different, but squash I love.
Yeah.
Oh yes, 2 days a week.
It's not one of my passions, but good for you. But one day, when we were starting a podcast, you started telling the story of one day that you fell in the ice.
Oh yes.
And then we stopped at the podcast, and then later I said, "No, don't tell me the story. I want to put the camera in front of you." What is this story about the ice?
It's everything is true. Actually, I set up one of the frontier funds. I don't remember. I think it was like 20 or 30 million US dollars or so. It was a Cayman or BVI fund, and the investors were pension funds from Europe, basically. So the investment managers for that came down to the release party, or what you call it. And I decided to have that in Austria, and instead of just having champagne and doing what normal people did, I said, we have to climb this mountain here. And it means that there will be 4 hours of walking on a glacier. So the investment managers of the pension funds in Europe, they all gathered together. Well, you walk with these ropes, and you need to have these goggles, you have special boots, glacier boots and so on. And we walked for 4 hours up to the top, and there we enjoyed the view and so on, and everybody thought it was cool. Then on the way down, I was second last. There was an investment manager from Salzburg in Austria, behind me only. And he was a very experienced glacier walker. He had done it for 20 years. So he was the last. I was the second last one. And I had invited everybody.
Do you notice what you just said? He was the most experienced, and he was at the end of the line.
Exactly. And then as we walked down, and apparently there was an investment manager from Varma pension fund in the front. That's a Finnish pension fund, and him together with other friends, they went in the front, and once there was a little crack, and it opened up exactly when I was there. So I fell down into the glacier. And normally 90% of the glaciers is that you actually see 10 meters down, you see that they converge. So basically there is some ground, so to say, ice ground.
So that is something to
But this was
this
was one of those that were not. Actually, it was just black. And the crack was like 20 meters that way and 20 meters. It opened up there. So, and so I fell in there. So I was down there, the ropes going down, like bang, everybody else threw themselves on the snow. And then, like what felt like like 100 years, someone. They pulled me up in the end, and this was the release party of a new fund. Imagine the fund manager going down together with the investment managers of half the.
Who is the guy leading this part? Is the guy in the hole? That's the one that had the idea.
I tell you, I was scared. I was so scared when I was down there, because everything is ice. It's very, very beautiful, but you don't really have the time.
You're not appreciating.
You don't take out your camera, take out your axe. And every time you sit like this, and every time you move, you go down a bit more. And the only thing you see is the sky up there, and then you see one rope over the edge there, and one rope over the edge there.
Yeah.
And it was awful. And then I started to shout in Swedish, "Hjälp! Hjälp! Hjälp!" And no one came, of course, in the beginning. And I was like, "Oh, I'm in Austria. I'm in Austria. Hilfe! Hilfe! Hilfe!" like that would make a difference.
Yeah, like that makes a difference.
Yeah, Hilfe! 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 Then the tour guide came. The tour guide came and basically dragged me up, and after that he said that there are like thousands and thousands of people that go over this glacier every season, and it's extremely. It happens once every 4 years. What happened to me? So I was the one. Yeah. So I was scared.
Happens what? That they come back, or
no, that they fall down, because it's also like this. 90% of the people who fall down in a crack, they actually only fall down so where they can hold their head above the level. But what you see in the Hollywood movies and so on, where the ropes start to to go, that's very unusual. But it was my close to death experience. So yeah. So we won't do that for a release party when you have the MVP.
Yeah, I prefer to do things that are
a bit more.
No. I like danger. I like challenge.
Exactly.
I like challenge.
But very forward.
But I prefer something that I have some notion of how to deal with. You know, like motorcycles are dangerous. You know, I like riding motorcycles and all that. Sometimes when people criticize some of my choices and, you know, this is what you do is dangerous. Did you know that I ride motorcycles? That one is because it's so unforgiving. The motorcycle thing is beautiful until it isn't. And then when it isn't, it's really ugly.
So
it gets really,
it
goes, it's wonderful or it's horrible. And there is nothing in between, pretty much. Not like when you're doing, let's say, I don't know,
it's like being as a military being shot at, or if you have incoming artillery fire against you. You know, there's nothing cool about that.
No,
you know, it's like being a soldier. That's cool until it's not anymore.
Until it's not, and then it's really horrible.
Yeah. Exactly. It's
Then it goes really, really bad, really fast, and the feeling of powerlessness, like when you are in a crack in the ice, and now you completely depend on others. There's nothing you can do really.
No.
All you can do is not make it worse. But you know, by not moving too much,
every time you try to do a little, you fell down a bit more. And I tell you, these other guys that were closest to me, they were scared to death as well, in order to fall down themselves.
That fucker took me this far, and now he's going to take me in that hole. That can be scary. So, what is life now?
Life is great.
What do you want to do?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like everybody else. I want to save the world also, but within my areas of knowledge. And for me, I work with so many smart, talented, and forward-leaning and energized people who can do their own little bits. So helping others to accomplish that is important. I'm in a very, very good spot in life right now. I feel comfortable about myself. I have 4 kids that all behave well. And they seem to be, they are happy. Both my parents are still alive and kicking and so on. So, and I love my wife and so I wouldn't like to be somewhere else right now. And I'm happy to say this. I'm very fortunate. I'm very, very fortunate. And I'm not sick. So I can afford to be forward-leaning and help others with their needs. As long as we are aligned with where should we go together, etc. Because if, for example, if you would have been coming to me and say, oh yeah, I want to be very rich and I want to buy myself a Ferrari. Okay? I wouldn't have an interest. Well, okay, you do that. Good luck. But good luck. I don't care. But here, you are an interesting personality, and also we have this community feeling together. Also, that we really want to promote. We also have about some of the existing competitors out there that we dislike for various reasons. So if we can do something better and make people come closer together, etc., that's very good. And for that, little money is needed here and there. But I think just as important for building a company, it's also to learn the techniques and to run the company properly. Where you're a good actor in society and still earn some money for the shareholders.
Yeah, that is. I knew that I had some to learn on that front, but I didn't know it was going to be so much, and I also didn't know that it was going to be so much fun to learn.
No, it's really relating to money investments in a serious way. It's like relating to relationships also. You know, it's like it's dating with money is part like dating with women sometimes. You know, you have to learn some techniques, but you also have to think about the long term and what you promise and don't promise and so on. And then, as long as you are smart and you work as hard as you can, and as you have a vision, a goal, a dream, which you are moving towards. Happy to. We are a group of people that are happy to help out with that, within our capabilities. So I would say in Lund there is all this talent and a lot of energy, but there is not so much money, but it's the money that counts in the beginning, the first step to get going. But then as you move up with the company getting more established and becoming perhaps moving away from entrepreneurial minded a bit more towards organizational minded, but still with the strong owner directives about what you want to do in the world, then the big money comes in. But it doesn't tend to be in Lund itself, the little Lund with 100,000 inhabitants, but then you have to go to Wall Street or London or etc. etc. But that's the next step. But as we come there, Milton, if we even want to go there, then it's much more to learn. It will be fun all the way.
Yeah,
I enjoy the first 2 steps of the 10. It's the most funny steps. It's like when the baby is born. But there is something to enjoy on each step there. We'll run together upwards and forward quick.
Yeah, you finish a lot of your emails with that way, upwards and forwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be doing this.
Me too.
Definitely happy to have you on the podcast. Yeah. Finally, it worked.
Yeah.
And all right, we are going to do another one with more crazy stories after we do a shareholder meeting somewhere in the world.
Exactly.
Then we'll do another one.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Milton.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We hope you like this podcast as much as we like to produce it. This has been made possible by the effort of dozens of volunteers, supporters, partners, and visionaries that are helping us build Xenia Travel. Please visit our website